Hi, this is Eddie Huff. A lot of you know me, but some of you don't, so I want to introduce myself. I wanted to tell you a little about myself for this new video log called Fresh Black Coffee. I want to tell you that I was born in a kind of an interesting environment. I was born in post World War II Germany in a little village outside of Nuremberg. One thing that the Americans did that they kind of recreated after the Civil War and Reconstruction, they took and put all black troops in Hitler strongholds. You'll remember if you look at your history, the military wasn't desegregated until Harry Truman's administration and into the 50s. And so what they did, they put American troops in German villages and towns that were throughout Bavaria, which were Hitler strongholds. My dad was one of those troops. Went over on a ship in 1948. Met my mother in Nuremberg at a club, and as hormones would kick in and things would have it, I came along 9 months later. 8 months after I was born, my father was shipped back to America, and my mother didn't know if she would ever see him again. 2.5 years later, he shows up. One night, the doorbell rang, or actually it was a knock back then, but we had a knock on the door, and who's there? My dad is there. And it still took another 1.5 years for them to get married, and I was actually 5 years old. They got married on July 4th, 1956. I was 5 years old, or about to be a couple of weeks later. In any event, I started my life as a German child. I spoke fluent German. I did not speak English until I was 6 years old. I went to a little Catholic school. And it's interesting, I never had the stigma of being illegitimate. I always thought of myself as special. And one reason I thought of myself as special is because I was treated specially in my little German kindergarten class. The nuns, it was Catholic school, the nuns kind of just took a real liking to me. They always put me at the head of the parades carrying the Catholic flag. We would go to carnivals and people would give me money to ride rides while my classmates watched me have all the fun. And so this is how I grew up in Germany. I was special. Well, at 7.5, my dad got orders back to America. My mother didn't have a visa and couldn't go with us. She had to stay. And for 3 months, she stayed in Germany while I moved to Philadelphia with my dad. We moved to the projects. And those of you that are familiar with Philadelphia, back in the 50s, the projects were on Poplar Street, right in the middle of downtown, about a block off Market and Broad Street. It's funny, but kids adapt. My first day there, or the next day after I woke up, I went downstairs. These projects were high rises, and they had 4 in a block, and in the center was a little playground. I go down to the little playground and meet this little guy. His name was Tubby. Tubby was the baddest kid on the block, and Tubby and I hit it off right away. And I went to Catholic school. Tubby went to public school, and I learned a lot of things from Tubby, like what gang fighting is all about. And so we took my little Catholic school class and divided it into gangs. And we decided we have to have a gang war because that's what gangs do. So after school one day, we decided to have this gang war. And unfortunately, my gang split and the other gang didn't. They beat me to a pulp. And there was a little girl from my class there, and she got the mother superior who picked me up off the ground, bloody, crying, and took me back to the school. And out of all of the compassion that Catholic nuns had in those days, she proceeded to get her yardstick and whip me. And then called my aunt. My aunt came to pick me up, and she told my aunt to whip me, that I could not come back to school until I was whipped again. So it taught me some lessons, and I did learn something. One of the things is I did not like Catholic school. Anyway, from there we went to Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. My mother finally came. My dad was stationed at the White Sands Proving Ground, missile proving ground, but we were at Holloman because that's where they shot the missiles over in the desert out into the New Mexico desert. While at Holloman, it was really quite a neat experience. It's probably the favorite place I've ever lived in my life. It was early in the missile program, early in the space program. In fact, if you ever seen the movie The Space Chimps, those chimpanzees, Ham, Enos, and Champ, were housed there. That's where they trained them before they shot them into space. And my dad had a second job after he got through with his Army duties. Every day he would clean out offices and hangars for the Air Force. And he would take me with him. And so I got to see where they kept these chimpanzees, and I got to sit in different jets, play around. Fortunately, I didn't eject myself or anything like that, but it was a pretty cool time. Another highlight of that time was I got to meet President Lyndon Baines Johnson and John F. Kennedy the same day. June of 1963, they flew into Holloman, and I was on the rope line. President Johnson showed up first. I got to shake his hand. President Kennedy got about 10 feet from me, and then they ushered him into, but he looked at me and had that smile and winked at me to let me know he saw me. And it'll stay to me until the day I die. Just seeing him, in my eyes, he was a great president. I still to this day think he was a good president. And it was a tragedy. We moved back to Philadelphia, back to the hood, and I went back to Catholic school. From there, we moved all over the place. I ended up back in Germany my junior year of high school. And the reason I'm telling you all is because this all sets the ground for who I am today. And I really think it's important because there's some lessons that are going to come out of this. So I hope you'll bear with me. In any event, we went back to Germany. And in those days in the military, when you grew up as a military child, race wasn't an issue. We were just kids. We were all Army brats or Air Force brats. And so we were a pretty tight community. In fact, the division there was officers' kids and enlisted kids. And officers lived in their little officers' housing. We lived in the enlisted housing. And one of the taboos was dating an officer's daughter and those type of things. But somehow we all just really got along. We did well and came out of there. Before we went to Germany, I happened to be in El Paso, Texas, watching a football game, and it was Texas Tech playing. And there was something about that double T on that helmet that stuck with me. So when I was about to graduate, I had a choice of universities I wanted to go to, and I chose two because I wanted to play football either in New Mexico State, because that was right down the road from El Paso, and the other one was Texas Tech. So I took my SAT, did well, got accepted to Texas Tech. Took my ACT on the same day I had a basketball game at 11 a.m., so got in there, rushed it, and blew it, and my course was set. Texas Tech was the school that I was going to regardless. And it was interesting when I went to Texas Tech because I was one of the first 50 black students on campus. I was one of the first 6 black football players. There was one, Danny Hardaway from Lawton, Oklahoma. He had come in 1967, and then 5 of us came and joined the team as freshmen in 1969. I was supposed to have a semi-private dorm room. I was supposed to have a roommate, but when he found out that his roommate was going to be black, he pitched a fit, and they put him with someone else, and I got a private room. Now, funny, a lot of people would be upset at discrimination or that this guy would not want to room with me. Me, being the positive person I have always been, I saw it, hey, I get a private room. So it was no big deal for me. I helped at that time found the first chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, a historically black fraternity. I became president of that my senior year. I was vice president of the Black Student Union. I was pretty much a radical and a Black Panther wannabe. I used to give speeches in front of the student union and became radicalized. When I graduated, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. I was out for about a month, didn't have a job, didn't have any prospect. Things weren't looking good. I was just getting high Oh, that's another thing I forgot to mention. While at Tech, I started doing, let's put it this way, you could smoke it or snort it, I would do it, or eat it. Needles, no. And so I also became a dealer. I did a whole lot of different things. And so, but I was totally transformed on June 8th, 1973. A few months later, actually about 9 months, April, I met my now wife. I was the prayer room counselor. In 9 months, I went from being a lost soul to a prayer room counselor for new Christians. And this girl came forward and ended up, she is now my wife of 42 years. But some things I learned when I first came to the Lord, and this, now I particularly want my black brothers and sisters, and really anybody to understand this. I had a major chip on my shoulder. I had some real fears and animosity towards whites. So when I first became a Christian there in 1973, everybody I met, I wanted to see how they would react to me. And I had like my racist radar up. So if you didn't smile at me, if you didn't welcome me with open arms, or if you were a certain way, I instantly thought racist, hypocrite, so forth. And so I went on like this, and it was not good. So one day I really felt the Lord speak to me, say, Eddie, you're not going to survive this way. You can't continue like this. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to love everyone you meet. And I'll show you three things. The first thing I'm going to show you is that you need to get over yourself. Not everybody that you meet is thinking about you. They have other issues, their wives, their girlfriends, their children, their job. And a lot of times they don't have time to be thinking about how nice they are or are not to you because they have their own issues. Second group is a group of people that are racist. And look at you. You went to Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas for 4 years, and look at you. You have all this animosity, all this bitterness against whites. Some of these people have been trained for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that black people are inferior. It's their upbringing. It's their environment. It's who they've become. But I will use you to change that. And finally, there are those who are racist, won't like you, never will, but I will harden their hearts like I did Pharaoh's, and I will deal with them, but I will repay you 10 times with love from other places for every bit of love you give to them. I said, whoa, I can't argue with that. Okay, deal. And from then on, that's how I've lived my life. I don't have time to think or worry about, do you like me? Do you not like me? Are you racist? Are you not racist? Are you an idiot? Are you not an idiot? I just live my life and let God take care of the rest. I will always try to reach out to you. I will try to be your friend. I will try to love and care for you. If you don't like me, it's on you. And so this is something I want to say to my, whether you're Black, Native American, Asian, Hispanic, whatever you are, if you are tempted or holding bitterness, grudges, fear, whatever, and you're not willing to let it go, God cannot bless your life. He cannot. As it says, Jesus said, if you don't forgive, neither will my Father in heaven forgive you. So particularly if you're a Christian, you must forgive to receive anything from the hand of God. Later, I ended up becoming a missionary, took my kids overseas. We went overseas for 12 years, and I've worked in Africa, North Africa, East Africa, Uganda, Kenya. I've been to South Africa to teach and minister, all over Europe. And one thing I wanted to tell you, an interesting thing. So a lot of these lessons I learned just from my experience as a missionary or walking in Christ. We went to a little village in Austria. And Austria, these little remote villages, a lot of them are where the Nazis who left Germany ended up. And so we ended up in this little village. I was over this ministry called Musicians for Missions, a part of Youth with a Mission, who we worked with over in Europe and Africa. And we would have a music group, a band play, and then I would preach afterwards. And so we're at this one little village somewhere in rural Austria, and I start speaking, and these Austrians out there are going, Quatsch, which is their word for BS. They weren't buying what I was selling. So and that would have been fine, the heckling. But to make matters worse, they got up and walked not straight out of the door. They walked all the way around in front of the podium where I was and looked at me, flipped me off on their way out of the door. And I remember being all freaked out saying, oh, what am I doing? This is not working. And I remember that calm voice of the Lord saying, hey, it's not your job to convince them. It's just your job to tell them. And I will do the rest. Either they'll respond or they won't. But your job is just to tell them. So that's what I'm doing now. Fresh Black Coffee. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell anybody that watches what I believe is the truth that has been revealed to me. It will be up to you to either accept or reject. And I hope we'll have fun. We're going to deal with a whole lot of issues. They're going to be off the wall, some of them, and some of them you may not like hearing, but at least I know you will be provoked. So I thank you. I look forward to these various broadcasts that we do have, and I welcome your emails. You can email me at freshblackcoffee@gmail.com. That's freshblackcoffee@gmail.com. I will respond, and look for my next one. My next one is going to be titled, What Color is a Mexican? Thank you. Goodbye.